say about Chinese contemporary art is that it really has this 30-year history. We often cite the most important kind of birth date, if you like, as 1979, when Deng Xiaoping declared his open door policy of China. And then, of course, everything changed in 2000. The Chinese government itself decided that it was okay for Chinese artists to show their work in museums, and we have since seen the Chinese government take on experimental artists in a kind of national representation. Well, again, I think that I always, it's funny, if somebody would have posed that question to me about American art, it would be really difficult to identify, one trend or even 5 trends. This, if anything, reflects a certain degree of maturity in the Chinese art world. Up until now, there have only been a handful of really major Chinese women artists on the international sphere who were able to show their work. And so I think that we're seeing those young women emerge. And we're also seeing a greater use of new technology, that in fact Chinese artists are really excelling, especially in the field of new media and video arts, which I think will capture people's imagination in time to come. Well, I think in terms of China being one of the world's centre of manufacturing, I think that has impacted on the ways that artists are able to produce works. In fact, I know of many artists from New York who have decided to go to China to have their works manufactured. The kind of factory structure, the ease with which you can have high-end things created. There are artists in China that have enormous studios that would take your breath away. There is one artist, in fact, his name is Zhang Huan, and he established a studio outside of Shanghai in an old textile factory, and he now has 3 complexes around that area and employs up to 100 people, just constantly creating new works. And so you might go to his studio one day and you might go a week later and there might be a completely different body of work being explored. So I think that has had a kind of flow-on influence as well. There are 2 artists that I would identify, and both of them are in some ways from a younger generation. The first would be Cao Fei, a young woman who lives in Beijing, and I think that her project for the Venice Biennale involving Second Life is really a great introduction, I think, for us in terms of ways that art and technology can work together. And the other artist I would mention is young Fudong, who creates these quite extraordinary films. On the one hand, they're very much about the nostalgia of Shanghai as a wonderful place in the early 20th century. And on the other hand, it speaks very much to Shanghai's emergence as a major financial centre in the region. And he really shows this young, urban, middle class, or yuppies, if you like. So that both these artists show in different ways the kind of changes that are going on in China, but in very unique ways. On the one hand, this younger generation is given a voice, but I think what is also interesting to note about China right now is that the generation of artists who are mostly in their 50s right now, a lot of them left China. In the lead up and around the time of '89, they left for different art centres around the world, most likely Paris and New York. What's really interesting about this is that there has been a huge return to the homeland. And many of these artists, even if they still continue to reside outside of China, have come to work at a high level with either business or government policy figures to actually influence China. And so I would say that certainly that generation who are in their 50s now have come of age, and they obviously bring to China a different set of values that has been changed by their living outside of China for over a decade now.